Hi, I'm Michael Croker, and this is Park Life. I've worked in the Australian theme park industry for a little over 30 years. And in this podcast series, I spend time in conversation with the people inside the business of making memories. Thanks for joining me. I hope you can subscribe, rate, and review. Enjoy the ride. Nathan Klassen grew up captivated by theme parks. They inspired a drive and a passion that has seen him rise through the industry into one of the very key roles for any park operation. Here's our conversation talking through the journey to date.
So I'm the operations manager for Warner Brothers Movie World and Wet n Wild Gold Coast. So I guess pretty much in essence, for me, anything that's front facing for guests that doesn't generate revenue, that kind of falls under me in some respect from a operational and a logistical sense of what we do every single day here in the park. So for me, I absolutely love it, live it, breathe it. It's, being out there and walking the beat. It's kind of my gig.
Who you
like
are?
to do, yeah, pretty much. So you'll see me out there, laying my green tape and moving park benches around.
We were just talking before we started here that it's been 10 years now in the industry.
10 years, yeah.
Can we jump back in time to when it began and kind of how it started?
Yeah, so if I go right back to early childhood for me, my backyard, my parents absolutely hated me. My backyard was a ever-evolving theme park, pretty much. Depending on what park I'd recently visited was dependent on what the park was in my backyard at the time. But that for me sparked the desire to one day come and work for the park.
What would you do? You'd have a park visit with the family, then go home and
build things in the backyard.
What kind of things were you building? Like out of garden furniture?
Yeah, so I would use, I've got a photo I'll show you, I've got a photo pretty much of me. It's the timber fence palings that I've chalked up with bricks. Yeah. I've got a skateboard that I've nailed a recycling tub to the top of, and that's what would have been a very dangerous roller coaster back then.
That's great.
But that was the creativity, I guess. I look back now and I go, God, I did some terrible things as a child that my parents were probably thinking, you're a dangerous man. You're a dangerous man. But for me, that was living and breathing, I guess, my passion and love for what we do here.
What was the thing that got you excited as a kid?
I think it was the idea that you come into these properties, and I guess I have fond memories of, for me, standing in the archway at Movie World with having a photo with two of the police academy performers. And that, for me, kind of sticks in my mind. It's when everyone says, "Oh, what do you kind of remember from that?" And that moment of stepping out of, I guess now when I look back at it, stepping out of reality into this kind of fantasy where everything's colour and movement and sound, and it's bigger than life. Yeah. I think it's an escape from that. Yeah. I've always been a very creative individual. Like I did drama for a lot of my life. Did local theatre, all that type of stuff when I was a kid. So I think that also kind of fosters that idea of some people's attraction to this environment and what we do in the industry. So that was kind of my biggest driver, was that idea of everything is grand, exciting. I just remember watching the parade here at Movie World back in the day, and I would scour the shops looking for the Movie World Park soundtrack so I could take it home and pop it in my CD player and belt the music in the backyard to try and relive this fantasy of what we get to do here now every single day.
That's terrific. How old were you when you first put your hand up to get a job in the parks?
So I did work experience back in 2007. So that was kind of my first driver to kind of get my foot in the door and understand what that was like. And I feel so sorry for my people advisor from school, because I would hound her like there was no tomorrow to try and organise this work experience here. And that for me, coming in here and doing a week, it gave me a variety of different things. I did a bit of retail, a bit of food, a bit of ops, a bit of entertainment. Yeah. So I did a little bit in that week, but that for me was that's probably cemented my desire to want to be here.
So you weren't disillusioned when you finally got in behind the curtain?
No, definitely not. Yeah. If anything, it probably sparked more of a drive and desire to want to be here. And then I pretty much waited until I was 18 to start to apply for roles, and that was primarily the prerequisites of operations at the time. So for me, it was kind of waiting for that moment to go, all right, now's the time, I'm set, I'm ready to go. So I waited until that moment. I believe I turned 19 the year that I started here. I started at SeaWorld actually as a external hired ride supervisor. And I think it was the first time that the business had gone down that avenue back in the day. So I was kind of like a test dummy, I guess, to some respect, as to if you were to look for someone externally to come into this environment, where do
you hadn't come through the front line,
no.
You'd come from the outside in.
Yeah.
What qualified you to be looked at for that role at that time?
So I had done, prior to here, I did 5 years at McDonald's.
Yeah.
And I was a first assistant manager for a franchise store, but then also outside of those duties was the safety manager for the 3 franchise stores that my owner-operator looked after. So a lot of it was food safety related, but food safety, general in-store elements that we would collate reporting. It was very administrative driven, but that was kind of the kicker, I guess, for me, was that having that safety kind of culture background.
Yeah. How did you find that initial time at SeaWorld in that role?
That was good for me, the journey at SeaWorld. I had my finger in a lot of different pots during that period of time. I did rides. It was the kickoff for us of the SpongeBob parade over at SeaWorld. So I did float driving for the kickoff of that. I did a bit of announcing for a period of time there, very short. That was, I think, at the wrap-up of Imagine.
Right.
In those days. That was a very short stint.
So the Imagine Dolphin show is what we're referring to there.
Yes.
How long were you doing that for?
I did that for probably about 4 or 5 months. And then I also lent to spending a bit of time as Big Al Baloney with Fish Detectives.
In the SEAL show?
I
had no idea.
Yeah.
Right.
So I did that for about 4 to 5 months.
Yeah,
when I was over there. So dabbled into a little bit of everything. And I still remember to this day, towards the end of that kind of first year at SeaWorld, my manager at the time had sat down with me and she said to me, she goes, Nathan, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're going in all these different directions. She goes, if I can give you one piece of advice, try and spend the next short period of time to narrow in on what is your greatest desire? What is it that drives you to want to be here? You've obviously got a lot of passion. Where do you want to find yourself? Where do you want to lead yourself? And that for me, at the time, was a bit of a harsh reality because I enjoyed all the different things that I was doing at that period of time. And it wasn't until probably 2 or 3 months down the track that I started to probably resonate on that a little bit more and self-reflect. And that kind of led me then in this path of going, entertainment was such a big thing, a big driver for me to begin with. And that, I think, came from my drama background and drama in high school and local theatre. That I kind of had a bit of a mixed idea of where did I want to find myself in this industry, in this business. And as the wheels continued to turn in my ops background, that kind of led me down the path of I like the idea of, you're dealing with the masses, you're dealing with large volumes of people and logistics and movement and all of the facets that come with what we do every single day in ops.
So SeaWorld operations then becomes more of a central focus for you.
Yes.
And we're talking now specifically rides and attractions.
Correct.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And In terms of your growth curve, you're still a young man, even younger than you are now, but you're still a very young man at this stage. How old were you?
I was probably back end of 19, almost 20 in that
Wow.
period of time. So for me, like I had a bit of the mindset also that being quite young at the time, I was like, I don't know if I really want to decide exactly what I want to do right now. Like I'm enjoying variety and dabbling into different skill sets and I guess being involved in many different facets of what we do rather than I guess pigeonholing myself to one particular thing. And that was probably that initial harsh reality of that conversation. And that conversation was lent with best intentions to say, you've certainly got passion for what we do.
But channel yourself.
But yeah, fine. Where do you want that journey to lead you? Pretty much. So that, I guess for me, that was that. It took me time to understand that guidance and that direction.
Did you have, sounds like you had mentorship
Yeah.
at this stage too?
Yeah. And my mentor, I guess, that was kind of guiding me at the time, she has also done a lot of different things within our industry and within our business. So that for me, I think, was also a point of understanding that yes, there are different layers to what we do, but find what is the channel that is your best desire or your greatest desire, and funnel all of your passions into what you want to live and breathe, I guess. And I'm very thankful now for that journey.
For sure.
Where I'm at. So,
what became one of the most, I guess, challenging parts of that journey for you when you've got your single-eyed focus now onto that world?
Yeah.
Was what brought to you the biggest learning on reflection, do you think?
I think that I look at probably having flexibility, I guess, in the respect of I was flexible to do all of the things that I was doing, all the different channels, a bit of entertainment. I dabbled into a bit of cleaning in the mornings for a little bit extra money.
Yeah.
Operations, attractions and rides. I found I had so much flexibility in myself and being able to do all those things and being open to doing all those things that I probably a few months down the track had a very narrow mindset in respect of growth and development in my journey, and I kind of put myself on one particular line rather than being flexible and being open-minded to where opportunity might present itself.
Yeah.
That then led me to applying for the role to become park supervisor at Wet n Wild. So for me, I had this very driven idea, or a very fixed idea, that rides was my only path, and that's the path then that I wanted to lead down. Rather than going, well, I could probably learn more about our business by understanding other facets of the business. So
what carries over to a water park from a dry park like SeaWorld, which is largely a dry park in terms of the rides and attractions? What skill sets do you carry over into a water park as a park suit? Because that sounds very specific. And it's also a very good rise in your career. So without getting too far ahead, how long were you at SeaWorld before the Wet n Wild chapter?
So I did about a year and a half at
Right.
SeaWorld.
Yeah.
So
What prompted the desire then to move out over to Wet n Wild? What drew you there to continue your growth?
that, I think, was my realization to go, don't be so fixed on
Right.
the idea that growth and development or learning has to come from one place.
Yeah.
Particularly, I guess we're very fortunate in our business here that we have that availability, that we have a number of different properties that all lend themselves to different personalities, different ways of operation that, for me at that point in time, that was probably that idea of going, I don't necessarily have to just stay at SeaWorld to continue to grow.
Just in that space, there doesn't seem to be any kind of fear in you about taking a chance on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're obviously driven by the passion that you had as a kid, developed for the parks,
Yep.
and there's a genuine love for the business. But there doesn't seem to be any self-doubt about what you might be able to achieve. Did that come from home? Did it come from your formative years as a teenager? Is it something you're even aware of? But it doesn't sound like you're someone that was second guessing yourself.
I don't. It's probably not something that I've really thought about a great deal, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I think I'm very fortunate that my upbringing, I was very, very much supported in my family upbringing to do what you want to do, be very passionate. My parents were parents that would lend themselves very thin on weekends to be taking me to local theatre, my brother to cricket or soccer or sport, and my sister to dance or physical culture. So we were, I guess, fortunate enough that they put everything aside to allow us to do the things that we wanted to do. And I think that probably lends to, I guess, my mindset and my drive and being open and flexible to challenge and accepting challenge when it presents itself, rather than, I guess, shying away from things that might be the unknown or...
Yeah, that's terrific. That's in you
different.
Instinctively rather than having to consciously bring attention to it. That's a great gift. The Wet and Wild experience must have brought with it its own set of challenges and evolution for you, because it's a completely new kind of park.
Yeah.
What's one of the bigger learnings you took out of that chapter?
My probably biggest learning from my journey at Wet and Wild, I spent about close to 3 years there. That was my journey before I then came back to the hard ride element. But my journey at Wet and Wild is understanding that patron behaviour is a big change for a water park environment. I guess you kind of have, there's so much control in a hard ride park. You know, you look at SeaWorld and Movie World, we have control in movement and control in process, control in attractions. You know, you're locking someone down into a harness that all they can do is stay seated, enjoy the experience, and then train comes back into the station and they can hop out and be on their way. In Wet and Wild, you've got patron behaviour elements that guests can do what they want. They can,
a bit more dynamic.
Yeah, they can go where they want to go. There's no structure to the day. There's
Interesting.
No shows. There's no idea of I've got to do X, Y, and Z in my day. I can kind of just go where I want. So the patron behaviour and the behaviour of the guest is such a big thing. You've got to probably become more adaptable, and you've got to become more, I guess there's a greater level of reasonable adjustment over there versus where we have such structure in parks like Movie World and SeaWorld. You know, the typical guest would come in and go, oh, I'm going to go and see the 11:15 dolphin show. And then after that, I'm going to go and ride Storm Coaster.
So you can bring
some lunch.
Science to the migration of a collective group of people.
Yeah.
And now you're in an environment where it is a little more open space.
Yes.
And it's kind of happening in real time all the time.
Yeah.
How many years with Wet and Wild, did you say?
3 years for Wet and Wild.
Yeah.
Then in that journey in itself, I dabbled into multiple opening seasons of Wet and Wild Sydney. So that in itself was a big learning for me to be
that's
present for that.
You're starting now with a park or a business that is effectively there. You're there at the very point of breaking earth.
Yes.
To
100%.
hand over and I guess the first year or so of operations.
Yeah.
That must have been an incredible time with no shortage of challenges.
Yeah, 100%.
And you're moving interstate back and forth.
Yes.
What was that experience like? Can you tell us, without going into great detail behind the curtain, but can you tell us what that did for you professionally and personally?
That for me was the idea of coming in. You've got to have, you don't want to be reactive. You've got to come in with the idea of understanding the challenges that you're about to be faced. And those challenges, yes, they may present themselves right here and now, but they're a challenge that they may face 2 days down the track, a week down the track, 2 months down the track, particularly in a new park and a new environment. For me, it was, we've got such regimented process in existing properties. Movie World in itself has got 29 years of operation.
Yeah.
There's regimented process and structure. To go to something that's brand new there is only so much of that you can establish from the get-go.
Yeah.
So you've really got to be thinking ahead, and that for me was probably my biggest learning of, rather than where we would maybe put out a spot fire here on these parks up here on the coast, where we can put out a spot fire, come up with solutions and move forward. You might put out the spot fire down in that brand new park in Sydney, but there's every possibility that same challenge will present itself again later down the track. And that's that learning of putting process in place. You've got new team members, you've got new leadership, you've got guests who are also brand new to that space and that environment. We're very fortunate here on the coast that we've got locals who understand our people, understand our processes, understand our offering, and they come because they enjoy those elements.
They have local knowledge.
Yeah. You don't have any of that, so you're very much starting fresh down there. But that was a big learning for me. One that I'm very thankful for.
How long on that project?
So the first season I did 12 weeks.
Yeah.
That in itself is a lovely story. We were actually filming the first day of the In-Betweeners. We're filming at Wet Mile Gold Coast.
The UK series?
Yep, UK series. So they were doing their film here in Australia. So they were day one filming at Wet Mile Gold Coast.
Yeah.
So I was here at, I think, like 2 a.m. in the morning to prepare for that. And the day continues to roll on and it reaches 11 o'clock. And I get a phone call from the general manager of Movie Board at the time, and she calls me and says, they've realised that there's probably a little bit more work that needs to happen before we start our pre-open previews down in Wet Mile Sydney. Need some help down there. Any chance you'd be able to help out? And for me, 100%, I put my hand up straight away and I'm happy to go. No worries at all. She turns around to me and says, all right, no worries, we'll just want to pack up your things, jump in the car and book your flight for 2 o'clock.
Right.
So boom, that day, straight on a plane, down to Sydney, grab my hire car, out to Western Sydney, and here we go.
Yeah.
And the moment that I stepped foot out of that car, it was a dusty gravel car park at the time because construction's still, packing up. And I got out of the car and I looked at this beautiful, expansive park. You pull up and arrive near the admin building. You look over colour and greenery of this beautiful property. That moment of being a theme park junkie and seeing that, I was like, what a beautiful park.
Yeah.
I was caught up in the excitement of it all to not realise what the journey of the next 12 weeks were going to be at that period of time.
But isn't it great just to jump in that space without wanting to cut your flow? But I think that's a really good point to make, that thrill of being in the business that you love still is something you can catch when it happens. And it's that the child in you hasn't gone.
Yes.
And obviously you can't be coming in functioning as a child every day. But if the child is in you enough that you can recognise it in those moments, then that's a reminder, I think, that you're still on the path you need to be on in the business you should still be in.
Yes, most certainly.
I think it's when you no longer have that sense of wonder or those little pockets of emotion when you see something that is still close to you in terms of this industry. That's when you probably are in trouble.
Yes, 100%.
So you were still getting that giddy kind of feeling of, as a park fan, look at this is beautiful. And then the other part of your brain has to kick in and say, yeah, it's beautiful, but there's a little bit of work to be done.
Correct.
Here. And so that period of time where you were moved back into Sydney, how long were you on the ground there?
So I was there for 12 weeks.
12 weeks.
For the kickoff. And then for the remaining part of that 3-year journey at Wet Mile Gold Coast, I went down each year for September kickoff to help those guys out with their park open. And that would be for about a 6 to 8 week period each year. And that was, you would face similar challenges, and that comes with pretty much completely turning the tap off on your day-to-day operation, packing everything up and closing for the winter.
Right.
And then you've got to restart that entire thing altogether again. It's funny, we put together a process around that execution. We call it the Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
You put the Christmas tree back up every single year, pop all the baubles on, but at the end of the season, you're packing it all down again. It's easy to put it all away in a box, but to go and unwrap that, take it all apart every single year is a big challenge every September to do that. But again, it was a journey for me that I look at what we've just gone through with the pandemic.
Yeah. And
there were so many things that through this reopen period for our parks here on the coast, there were so many elements of Wet n Wild Sydney for me that were this natural instinct of, this is why that we did this in Sydney. This works. This method of turning the tap back on again. It works here.
Yeah.
So it was really kind of refreshing, I guess, to lend some of that skill set, which was some time ago now, lend that to what we did here to be able to turn the parks back on again.
It's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes you're getting your learnings without knowing you're getting them until you have to call on what you've learned at the time that you needed to call on it, and then able to go, this is handy because I can relate this back to a time when I kind of know what this is. It's familiar.
Yeah.
That's that growth that happens organically over the course of your lifetime if you're open to it and if you're in the game long enough, which you clearly have been.
Yeah.
So coming out of that experience, if we were to jump ahead a little bit in time, Wet n Wild Sydney opens and it does what it does, and you're back on the Gold Coast. What eventually draws you out of water parks, and then where do you move after that?
That was my coming back up, I guess, and doing that 3-year stint at Wet n Wild Gold Coast. That probably fueled a greater desire, more so for the industry for me, rather than narrowing in on a particular property or the elements or facets of that particular property. So for me, I guess it was that idea of, there are so many things about what we do in our business that all lend to themselves. They all come hand in hand. So for me then, my journey from that point became very much moving from property to property, and I spent a good portion of time there where I would find myself at one property for probably no more than 6 months before then hopping on over to the next property to fill gaps or...
Can you give us an example of that period?
Yeah, so there was probably a big yo-yo period for me where I left Wet n Wild to fill a maternity leave secondment at SeaWorld as park supervisor. I did that for 8 months. Left that secondment to then come to Movie World to fill another secondment, parental leave secondment again. Yeah. I then ended up back at Wet n Wild for 3 weeks. Got picked up for another secondment to go back to SeaWorld. So yo-yoed back there again.
Just during that period of moving back and forth across the sites, was there a sense of where do I belong, or was it more of a sense of, no, I'm quite happy to hop here because I'm bringing what I know into the business and servicing a need, and I'm also picking up some new learnings along the way? Or was there a sense of, hey, you know what, it'd be great to know I'm going to plant some roots at the back of this? Yeah.
There's probably a bit of both, to be honest. There was an element of me that at that period of time was, do I have my own direction? Where do I want to be? And that, I think, is that natural instinct. You work with, I was working with colleagues in those particular parks that were in those roles or were in their roles for some time and had been in those parks for some time. So I think you have that natural instinct of going, where is my journey then? If I'm the one who's hopping around going from place to place, do I have structure? These guys have got structure, they've done what they've done for some time. What happens to me at the end of this secondment? Where do I end up? So there was a little bit of that, but I look back now, and I'm so thankful for my journey to have gone in that direction, and that for me was the learning of being able to be adaptive, work with different teams for short periods of time. There's so many diverse characters within our business and people within our business. That for me, I think has really probably lended to my skill set now of understanding different people, different personalities that are within our business.
That's a good place to stay. I mean, I know when I was a show announcer as a younger guy years ago, you would have to move into the water ski team department and develop relationships there in order to do the work.
Yeah.
Then you would finish and you would go over and work with the SEAL team or the Sea Lion team. But you needed to coexist with that dynamic because that was its own microculture. And then there was the dolphin team, and that was the same thing again. Then you had your own culture within the announcing team. And you weren't afforded the luxury of just being a certain way all day long with one group.
Yeah.
You had to be able to find connection and build bridges with these other microcultures. And then again, you're learning these skills about dealing with humanity and in all its various forms, which helps you certainly as a leader too, as you grow and you start to understand that there are only so many personality types.
Yeah.
And when you can identify your own, it becomes a little bit easier to identify the others.
Yes.
And then there'll be similar traits that will run through. There'll be people's own individuality, but there'll also be certain baseline elements that'll make up a certain grouping of personalities.
Correct.
So you inherently to be able to do that, you've got to have a little bit of a liking for people. Is that something that you obviously had? You had a certain amount of tolerance and liking?
Yeah, I guess as corny as it may sound, I'm a big people person. I think that there's a saying that my team absolutely probably hate the saying now because I overuse it all the time and I'll whack it on everything that I can whack it on. It's like a bumper car sticker pretty much. But there's a saying, a Walt Disney quote, which is, without reciting it word for word, talks about the fact that we can build these beautiful environments, but in essence it takes people to make the dream the reality. And I'm a big believer that our people are what drives what we do. We could allow guests to come into this beautiful landscape that we have here at Movie World, for example, with no characters, no team member engagement, no people. Sure, it's got pops of colour and it's beautiful and there's music and there's all these elements, but take away all of that, there's nothing left to that if you don't have the people who drive what we do every single day. That for me, I think, is probably where, yes, I would say that I'm a very people-driven person. Engage with your teams, be present.
No, that's great.
It fosters the culture that I think is what you need in this space, in this environment.
Yeah. I had a corny, some would call it corny, little metaphor, a story that I would tell my staff when I was at Wonderland Sydney all those years ago. And that was that the business is the body and blood coursing through the body is the people.
Yeah.
And we want to keep the blood healthy and we want the blood to be moving to all the right locations efficiently.
Yes.
And the body will stay robust.
Correct.
So as long as we've got healthy blood, and the metaphor did go on, but I won't make this about my metaphors. But I would live by those, and I think it is about people. Just to jump, you mentioned Disney before, and I've seen some of your social posts over the years, and there's a constant that kind of trickles through, and there'll be images or stories from your experiences seeing other parks overseas, which goes back to clearly demonstrating your love for all things parks.
Yes.
What is it particularly about some of your experiences, let's say with a Disney or any other kind of brand in the US, when you've been really impressed? What have been the things that have done that to you? What's it left you with?
I think for me, it's the one. I think there's a big people element to their parks that I'm a big fan of, and I think that's that engagement and being involved and being a part of the story. You look at properties like Disney parks for a perfect example. They've got there's such brand loyalty to what they do that their people become so involved and throw themselves into the story and the environment and the reality that they're working in. That for me, the idea of being able to again leave that escape of reality to be able to go into this environment that is there's fantasy, there's discovery. That for me is a big love for, I guess, what we get to do, and for me personally, it's about being the opportunity to be a part of that. When you talk about, for example, just then when you talk about Disney parks and you reference those snapshots where you've seen my visits and whatnot, for me, that instantly gives me a visceral feeling towards what we do and those experiences. And I think that they're the things that if you can take that moment to, for me, recognise that right now, for a perfect example, if I'm having those moments, they're the moments that drive me to be able to provide that for the people that come and visit our parks or come and visit what we do. I absolutely love taking people to the places that I've been able to go and visit and travel. Friends, family, to be able to take them to those parks and experience what joy and desire I get from that. That for me is a big passion driver to go. I talk about this stuff all the time, and it's all you hear about is me, banging on about Disney or talking about this or talking about that. This is why I love what I love.
I had the pleasure years ago would have been around 2006, and the chief executive officer at the time for Village Roadshow Theme Parks was John Menzies.
Yep.
And I kind of grew up being aware of John, and he was an innovator, and he's as close as, I guess, as anyone has been in the history of the parks at that time to a Disney-esque Walt type character. He was an innovator, he was a pioneer. And I had this rare opportunity to travel to the States with him, and we were visiting a Disney park. And it was my very first time in a Disney park, and I'm with John.
Yeah.
And I remember the excitement John had about me being there to see this park. And it was like a scene out of a film. He's moving at double time. He's a man, I think would have been in his 60s at the time. He's moving at double time through the park, and I'm hurrying behind through the crowd, a bit overwhelmed, and I'm maybe mid-40s, late 30s. And the excitement that he had of, Michael, wait till you come around and look around this corner here. I'm going to show you this particular street, and look at what they've done here in terms of design. And he would be opening my eyes up to, can you see how they've installed this street in such a way where there's nothing to pull your focus away from that feature at the end of the street, which might be the castle. And we went and watched the shows. And again, it was like getting this masterclass from a master about what makes this particular park work as well as it does. There is something going on here. There is some science in design and layout, in colour. And for me, it was exciting just to see him excited.
Yeah.
That it was, wow, I'm in the company of someone who still hasn't lost that childlike exuberance, who still comes into a Disney park, for example, and walks around wide-eyed, who you would think would have every right to be a little jaded and matter-of-fact.
Yeah.
But he was, I want you to see this. Can you see what they've done here? Can you see how they've done that there?
Yeah.
Can you see how genius that is in terms of design? And so, it's always wonderful to be around leaders that have that sense of excitement about the work that they do.
Yeah.
So with your current role, could you give us a little bit about just what that involves and how it came to be? Can we talk about when that began and what that brings with it?
Yeah, so I'd actually just taken a short stint away last year and stepped out of directly working in our parks to go and work for a company that still works with our business and with our parks, and be on the other side of the fence, I guess. Even for that in itself was such a good learning opportunity for me to be, I guess, in the shoes of the other guy that's a part of our process. We all too often, we do what we do in our parks as, I guess, people of our business, but then I probably don't always think about the fact of, well, what about those that I'm dealing with that are not directly a part of our business?
Yeah.
They lend their expertise, they lend their experience, they lend their services to complement what we do every single day in our parks. But I've probably never put myself in their shoes. So for me, that was a big learning curve to be a part of that. And I was there for about 8 months. So it was a nice little step away to be on the other side.
But it brings you back stronger.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I remember receiving the phone call asking me, would I be interested in coming back to the parks? And that moment for me was the realization of how much I appreciate what we get to do here every day. Missing that, over that period of time, so many things that I would have typically been involved in had come and gone for the year and they'd been done. There was a part of me that had a bit of FOMO, missing out on being a part of those things that typically you would be a part of. Yeah. So for me, there was no hesitation to say, "Oh, I'll be back tomorrow if you'll take me back. I'll come back straight away."
Let's just talk about the size of that role, because it brings with it obviously an immense burden of responsibility across multi-sites.
Yeah.
So, and again, there's this pattern of not being daunted by what you think you're able to achieve. So you've obviously jumped back in willingly for that. When you looked at the scale of that role, there was no trepidation. Obviously, it excited you.
Yeah.
What lured you back in terms of appreciating how big that role would be? What did you think you might bring into that?
I think this was probably when I talk about my park hopping that I'd done back in the day, where I'd moved from one park to another. Even my journey towards the end, before leaving briefly, I was still a seat warmer to some respect. I was filling secondments as they came along. So prior to that, I kind of had a feeling that I felt as though I was the babysitter. I was filling the chair, I was filling the space and leading the ship, most certainly, but I didn't feel as though I was able to innovate or make positive change. So for me, that was probably one of the biggest desires, coming back knowing that I had the availability to come back to this, and for this to, I guess without being, for a lack of a better word, for this to be mine, I guess, was such an exciting idea that I could put my passion into it. I could put my flair to things. I could consider what are the things that we could be doing better, rather than, I guess, sometimes not even just in this environment, even the big players within our business, your Disneys and your Universal, can sometimes be caught in the idea of, well, this is the way that we've done things for a certain period of time. It works okay, why change it? There's always the opportunity to relook at ways that we can better improve what we do.
How do you maintain that level of connection? Because you have that grassroots beginning, which we've talked about, and you've come through. Now you have this global view across Warner Brothers Movie World and this Wet and Wild, particularly with those two sites that carry with them a big burden of responsibility from a safety perspective and everything else that comes with it. And you're now sort of flying at a layer where you're moving across all of that. How important then are those layers of expertise that sit beneath your role and carry the load? How do you maintain a strong, cohesive bond there?
It's funny that you say that, because if I look at probably the other thing that gave me a lot of confidence coming back was knowing the individuals who would be a part of the greater team.
Right.
All people that I'm very familiar with, people that I know have the same spark, have the same desire to do great things within our business.
Share your values.
Correct. And that for me makes my job every single day very, very easy to work with like-minded people that I can come in here and my idea might foster or spark a discussion. My idea might not be what we end up with in the end, but it sparks the idea of, let's think about the bigger picture. What are the layers that come with that? And I'm very thankful across both of the two properties that I work a part of. The leaders that are within those parks are all leaders who are all striving for the same end goal, and that's to, provide the experience for our guests, to look at what are the ways that we can be reinventing ourselves. Are there better ways of doing something that we've done for 29 years? It's something that we often talk about here, particularly for Movie World. We've done what we've done here for such a long period of time, but are there better ways of doing that? Are there better ways of improving the experience, not only for our guests, but also for our team members? That's something I think that I don't think that we forget that, but sometimes we might put guests first. There's treat your employees the same as your guests, and that will give you an even greater end result.
Yeah, for sure. We talk a lot in our area about the idea that you get the team you deserve.
Yes.
So pay a lot of attention to that idea.
Yeah.
And nurture that. Do you see people, without being completely narcissistic, which is not the point of the question, do you see a young Nathan Klassen every now and then? Do you see, I know that I do in my area, I'll see or have a conversation with a young performer and I'll hear echoes of a similar journey because there's similar desires in there.
Yeah.
Do you come across those people still to this day?
100%.
Yeah.
In both parks. And for me, it's that they're the flares that pop up.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, I identify those flares as, the term that some people might use as, you Frankenstein yourself over time. You work with so many different leaders within whatever workplace or environment that you're in. You Frankenstein different elements from different people. For me, I recognise those moments as they are the layers of Frankenstein that I think, for me, I've gone, this person does that such a great way, or they address or tackle that solution or tackle that situation in such great form, or there's great thought process to that.
Right.
They've, rather than just skimming the surface, they've really dug deep to think about all the other elements that might come to that. For me, when I see the leaders that I'm fortunate to work with, those moments where I see little bits in them, I recognise those as they're those Frankenstein moments that I never used to be like that. That might have been a learning that took me some time to think like that, act like that, consider like that.
I find it's exciting when you create an environment where you want to be surprised, where you get the right people in a room and facilitate the framework, perhaps, for the conversation.
Yes.
And then get surprised when someone delivers a thought out of the blue that hasn't been in the space that you might be in.
Yeah.
And that's the best idea.
Yes.
You go, well, that works.
Yeah.
Let's do that. And so for me, it's recognizing that part of that, my responsibility is to ensure that I'm allowing those conversations to breathe in such a way that people can feel comfortable enough to say, what if this?
Yeah.
And recognize at this point in the process, guys, no idea is a bad one.
Correct.
Let's just get them out and throw them on a wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
100%.
Yeah.
And I guess that's probably to my point before, I guess the idea might start with me, it might start with someone else.
Yeah.
But the fact that that idea can go so round table and completely evolve from being maybe a planted seed to turn into something that is so big, that doesn't just come from one person. That's a number of different people being involved in that, looking at it from all different angles. I think that's probably where one of the things that makes working in this environment and getting to do what I get to do every single day so attractive is that we are so fortunate to work with such a large group of individuals who are all like-minded.
Yeah.
They think in the same direction. Their agenda is also, we're all driven to the same agenda.
For sure. And I think to your point, I was, I don't know, maybe 23 when I pitched a show concept to the then manager at SeaWorld. And it wasn't a show that they were asking for. I just felt it was a show that they needed.
Yep.
And it would have been easy to have a culture where if we haven't asked you for anything, don't bring us anything.
Yeah.
But we had a culture which I think resonates today where it was, okay, that's interesting. Take me through it.
Yeah.
And there I was as this young kid taking them through it. And the short version of a long story is that idea eventually took root and became a thing for quite a few years. And so that has never left me, that idea that that's important to maintain that culture where let the ideas be fertile, let a culture develop where the team can not only feel validated but feel that they can bring forward thoughts, because you just never know where the next great thing might come from. Just to ask you a couple of final questions, and appreciate your time here in this episode. So what is it that still keeps you motivated? And I think we may have touched on it throughout our chat, but what is it that still keeps you getting up in the morning wanting to do it?
I think that the essence of it for me is probably my deep-rooted passion, I guess, for what we do every single day. This morning was probably that greatest realization for me of going, right now, we're at the start of, or the end of December. We're in the busiest time of our year. This is the moment that we prepare for every single year. To drive into work today, knowing that I get to be on the ground, out there with the people, out there with the guests, tweaking, fine-tuning, that for me goes back to my basic roots of being a ride supervisor back in the day. It allows me to come in here and, I guess, be hands-on and be involved in what we do every single day.
Great.
To be still afforded the availability to do that in what I do makes me love what I do, rather than being stuck behind a desk in front of a keyboard every single day.
Busy being busy.
Yeah, I'm so thankful to come in here and be me, be out there, be present, be involved, be hands-on.
Yeah.
The idea of being able to follow the parade at the end of the night, for me, is that typical token theme park opportunity to be present and be there and be available. They're those small little moments that, for me they're the highlights. So
I might even join you walking up the back of that one night just to feel that again myself. What, if you had to look back, and I'm sure there's many, if you could single out one of the proudest moments that you have and just recall that, what would be one of the proudest moments in your working life?
My proudest moment, to be truthfully honest, as much of a challenge it was, as exhausting as it was, the opening season of Wet n Wild Sydney was probably my biggest learning. I had so many takeaways from that experience. It was long, it was exhausting. They were big days. That park in season 1 was open from 8 a.m. until 11 p.m. at night. That was a big effort by everyone who was involved in that. That is probably the moment that I go. It was also probably my turnaround moment within this business, where I really probably recognised where my passion and desire lies, or where my journey was leading was the right journey. It was where I was meant to be, what I wanted to do. That was probably my biggest moment.
As they say, if there's no adversity, there's no growth.
Correct, 100%.
Mate, been terrific to have you on and to spend almost an hour going back through your career. Thank you for making the time.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. A little trip down memory lane.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers.